Well, good day and welcome to you. It is July the 10th. I hope you are doing well today wherever you happen to be. My name is Gary Willing. Want to welcome you to Search for Signs and just point out if you want to know more about this information, I have provided links to websites that give wonderful background information about what we talk about. I say it all the time. Please don't take my word for what I'm saying, just on the fact that I'm saying it. Hopefully you'll look into some of this information for yourself. You might think that what I'm saying is not true and investigate it and start to see that there might be something to what I'm saying. You might even go the other way. You might even start to investigate this and go, nah, there's nothing to this. And that's your right. So that's why I hope that you take the time to investigate what I'm saying. And you can do it however you want to do it. You can read about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom on Share International's website. You could even, if you weren't interested in that, check out what I'm saying about the need for peace and how important it is, and how even just a little tiny little war can escalate to a nuclear holocaust, and why peace is so important, like Maitreya is saying. Or even look at, is it true what Maitreya says? Without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. And without peace, there could be no future. That's core to his priorities of humanity, is the need for peace. That's the most important thing that we need to do. Does sharing bring about justice and bring about peace? And then I cite this historical evidence that it does with the Marshall Plan. You can look and investigate it and see if that's true too. See if any of those nations like the United States and England and France and Germany have attacked one another since they started the principle of sharing, and it ended. But when they started and stopped the principle of sharing under the Marshall Plan, you can look into it that way too. So hopefully you'll look into it. Now, I do want to thank personally from the bottom of my heart N. Curtis, Mohammed Al-Majir, Mark Hill, Cynthia Jaworski, and there was one other person whose YouTube name is in a different language, and unfortunately I can't pronounce that, but whoever you are and all these other people, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to comment. So I really do appreciate it. And I have a question to cover too in the two. But one thing I want to say about a comment, Mark Hill wrote in a previous video, SOPs, Save Our Planet, Save Soil, because he was commenting about, in a video where he actually listened to the video because I actually said it in the video. So kudos to you, sir. SOP, Save Our Planet, is a very simple phrase. And the masters are hoping that that becomes a phrase that's a rallying call for people who are marching for a better environment, for the saving our environment. That it might be maybe a way to, unite people. SOP, Save Our Planet. Quite simple. Very powerful, but yet simple. Anyway, so he was commenting about that, and then he said save soil. And I mentioned something about, I didn't know what he meant by that. I thought he was maybe meaning something else, and maybe it was a spell correct, save our soul or something, instead of save soil. But he went on and talked about some information that he has about the soil and everything like this. Quite extraordinary stuff. I really appreciate you doing that. If you're interested in that, definitely check out what he had said. It'd be better for you just to read directly what he said. But I do want to say this, because when you read it, it reminded me of some information that I came across online a month or so ago, where they were talking about how nutrient poor the soil is now. And I remember when I was a kid, that was like the big concern, right? Was topsoil. Maybe this is kind of what you're thinking, right? Or what you're trying to say in your comment, right, Mark? But in the 80s, that was it. It wasn't climate change. It was about the soil. And there were a lot of experts that were talking about if we don't save this topsoil, it's going to be very hard to grow crops. Well, it must have been 6 months ago, I think, I was thinking, I guess there was nothing to that because they're still able to grow crops, right? Well, I was wrong, because then I came across this information talking about how nutrient poor the soil is, and it's taking a lot of fertilizer just to really grow crops that we didn't need a lot of fertilizer to grow crops just a few years, maybe a few decades ago, and how it's creating a nitrogen shortage. I don't know if you heard about that too, Mark, but it was, quite extraordinary stuff. But the environment in our planet is sick and dying. We can save it. There's still time, but we're dying. And I remember Benjamin Creme back years ago said that if the planet, like somebody asked him how bad the planet really is, how bad off is it right now because of the environment stuff and pollution and things like that. And he said if it was a person that was sick, it would be in the back of the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and the paramedics are doing everything they can to keep it from dying before it gets to the hospital. That's how bad the environment is. And when I read this report, it really kind of woke me up to, yeah, I mean, if they have to, I mean, they were saying how unsustainable, even just the way we are growing food now with the soil being as poor as it is, because it's really just dirt. It's not nutrient-rich soil like it was, prior to just a few decades ago, that it's taking everything that we got just to get the food growing. It's really, really, really tough shape. So, but I do appreciate that. But save our planet, and like you said, save the soil for sure. Let's see, what else? Okay, so, and then N. Curtis asked a question. I got a question this time. Did he, Maitreya, try to come in the 80s but was blocked from doing so? And it kind of goes along the lines of the question that of the person whose YouTube channel I can't pronounce always asks, is he going to come at this time? It's important to look at really what the situation is with Maitreya. Maitreya is already out in the open. He's just hidden because or really in incognito because he's not claiming to be Maitreya. He is already in front of the public eye. So he is already here. He hasn't come. He's not come. And even in the 80s, he was already in a modern city. He was already living in London at that time. Now, he left his ancient retreat in the Himalayas, about 17,500 feet up, that he had been living in for millennia, and entered London on July 19th, 1977. Prior to that, 5 masters, one in New York. The first one went into New York, actually. The second master entered London, Geneva, and then Darjeeling and Tokyo. And then 2 more entered their cities. One went into Rome, which is the master who is Jesus, and the other one into Moscow. And then since then, there are other masters that have gone into some other major cities, but those were the main ones that Benjamin Creme talked about. He did also mention that there were 2 masters also in 2 major cities in the United States, one in LA and one in San Francisco. And then eventually it was Paris, I think, and Beijing, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think there's much more than that. But Maitreya entered London at that time and was living in the Asian community of London. Now, he wasn't blocked from coming out more than he was. So it's not correct to say it the way that you wrote it. So let me just, that's what I'm trying to just clarify what you're saying, or clarify it maybe it's different than what maybe you're thinking, is he was able to come into London at the time because humanity did 3 things right after World War II. When he made the announcement that he was going to have to come back himself along with his group of masters in 1945, he made this announcement through Alice Bailey, and she wrote it out in one of her books. And he said that humanity would have to do 3 things in order for him to come back. 1, a measure of peace would have had to have been established at some point. Now, it didn't have to be a lot, it just had to be some. Second, the principle of sharing had to start to at least govern political affairs in the minds of political leaders at that time. And then the third one, which is, to me, seems rather far-fetched, or at least a stretch at the very minute, that the political parties in every country, had to start cleaning house and cleaning up their house and cleaning up some of the corruption in the parties. Those were the 3 things. Didn't have to be perfect, but just had a measure of those things. And the Marshall Plan, which we talk about in this channel all the time, was the reason why he was able to come back, because it was the principle of sharing one time, just for a little bit of time, but it did work, and it created a measure of peace. That's what I keep trying to say, right? So it allowed him to come back, and he was hoping to come back by like 19, I think 50, 52, something like this, but it got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back because the Cold War started, and then he couldn't come back because there was, anyway. Yeah, he works within the law of cause and effect, that was probably a big one in terms of the Cold War. It had to do with the karma that humanity was creating for itself, I'm sure. Also, he has to work within the law and think about the law of harmlessness and the law of free will. So he's not blocked in a per se, but he's limited based on us. And it's based on our free will, based on the fact that they can't just show up and say, hey, we're here. It doesn't work like that. The notion that the Christ can come back through the clouds and confirm everybody's beliefs in the way that the Christians believe that he will is erroneous, because it goes totally against human free will. And even looking back historically at Jesus, there were things that had to happen first. John the Baptist had to start kind of letting people know that the Christ was about to come back. The Messiah was coming back. He couldn't just come back the way that he could come back too. He was there. People didn't recognize him because he wasn't claiming to be that. He wasn't claiming to be the Son of Man. So, but once he started his work, he needed somebody as a predecessor to kind of let people know. So, this go around's no different, other than the fact that it's a global event and not just a tiny little event in Palestine like it was 2,000 years ago. So it's a little trickier, a little different. But anyway, he lived in the Asian community of London, and his predecessor that was there to alert the media and let the public know that he was here was Benjamin Creme. That was his job. And in 1982, Benjamin Creme had a press conference. The press showed up, and he said, all you have to do is go into the Asian community of London and look for him. You won't find him, but he will know that you were there. He said it would take a journalist of some kind of reputation, or a group of journalists ideally, to go into the Asian community of London and seek him out. And that would indicate to him that humanity was ready. So he wasn't blocked. It's just humanity is not ready for the changes, really. And if you look honestly and objectively at what you know about humanity today, are we truly ready for the changes? Yes, Maitreya says within the hearts and minds of the hearts of people is this longing for peace, longing for unity. That's true. Maitreya wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true. But also he says how complacent we are, right? And so, there's only so much he can do, you know what I mean? But he is on TV speaking to humanity in the way that he is. And he has already given an interview. And he's given interviews in different countries, Whether that's changed a little bit and he's not maybe doing so much on TV, maybe he's talking to groups, I don't know. But he will not claim to be Maitreya until, and we won't know 100% if that's Maitreya. And it doesn't matter if we believe it or not or whatever, it's about the priorities. But he will not claim himself to be Maitreya until the day of declaration. So, and that's when he will come before humanity. In fact, actually, it's said by Benjamin Creme that we will demand from our news media time for him to speak to us at one time. So it's not going to come from him, it's going to come from humanity. That humanity will demand from all the news media, let him speak. We want him to speak. That's basically, in essence, what the Masters said is going to happen. And then he'll come out before the world and he will start to address the world at one time, but he won't open his mouth. We'll all hear what he has to say inwardly, in our own language, in our own head. So if you're from France, you'll hear it in French. If you're English, you'll hear it in English. If you're from Japan, you hear it in Japanese, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And he says, not only will everybody over the age of 14 will hear his message inwardly in their own head. He said, Maitreya himself said, it will be as if he embraces all of humanity, that we'll feel his energy even physically. And then the third miracle that will happen on that day is there'll be hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of spontaneous cures all over the world. that people won't be able to explain. They'll all of a sudden just have a terminal illness or whatever, injury or whatever, that will be cured miraculously. And then, as Benjamin Creme said at every one of his interviews and every one of his lectures, he goes, those three ways, and only those three ways, will we know that that man, and only that man, is the one who has been awaited by all the world's religions. That's what that's how he ended everything. So I say this from time to time. Maitreya, at one point, this was back in 2009, so right before he did his first interview, I saw him on the street, and he, as a young African-American fellow, maybe like in his 20s, said some things to me that were quite astounding, said some things to me that I've looked at and learned from and it's changed my life. But the one thing that he said that really stuck, obviously, is he says, you'll see me on TV real soon. And this is the important thing. He said, we'll change the world together. That's what it's about, changing the world together. You take care. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.